Welcome to Echoes of the Unknown, the podcast where we'll be exploring some of the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries. I'm Jack Montgomery, and today we're traveling back to 2006 when the body of Rey Rivera was found in a locked conference room of Baltimore's Belvedere Hotel. It apparently crashed through the roof from a height of 200 feet in a manner that baffled investigators. A cryptic note taped behind his computer, a panicked phone call, and a trail of unanswered questions turned his death into one of the most perplexing cases of the modern era. Before we delve into this case, let's get a better understanding of the man at its center. Rey Rivera was born on June 10, 1973, in Madrid, Spain, to Angel and Maria Rivera, who were originally from Puerto Rico. His family, which included a brother and sister, relocated to the United States shortly after his birth due to his father's military service. Rey moved around a bit while he was growing up, and during his childhood and his teenage years, he and his family lived in both Southern California and Florida. In 1987, the Rivera family eventually settled in Winter Park, Florida. Rey attended Winter Park High School, graduating in 1991. He was tall, about 6'5", and during high school he distinguished himself as an athlete, particularly in water polo. In fact, Rey helped his team secure its first state championship in 1990. His older brother Angel described him as a way brighter kid and a really good student who took advanced placement classes and was popular among his peers. Rey's family background influenced his cultural identity and expanded his social circle through his fluency in both English and Spanish. Rey pursued his higher education at the University of the Pacific, California's first and oldest university. While there, he played on the Pacific Tigers men's water polo team. After graduating with a bachelor's degree in 1995, Rey briefly played water polo professionally for the Royal Federation of Water Polo League in Spain before returning to the U.S. From 1998 to 2001, he coached the boys and girls swimming and water polo teams at John Burroughs High School in Burbank, California. Rey subsequently served as an assistant coach for the men's water polo team at Johns Hopkins University. Friends and family described Rey as being charismatic, outgoing, ambitious, and intellectually curious. He was known for being warm and talkative, and he was very creative, having a strong interest in storytelling. He wanted to write screenplays, make films, and build a life around creative work. Rey met a young woman named Allison Jones through a mutual friend. Around December 2004, Rey moved with Allison, by then his fiancée, from California to Baltimore. She had a job opportunity of her own there, and the move seemed like a chance for both of them to build stability while Rey continued to pursue creative projects on the side. They settled into a modest home in Baltimore's Northwood neighborhood before getting married in November 2005 in Puerto Rico. By all accounts, their marriage was happy and stable. Friends described them as affectionate and supportive of each other's ambitions. Rey expressed enthusiasm for starting a family, and he and Allison planned to return to California within the year to build their future together, and where Rey could pursue a career in filmmaking. One of the most important relationships in Rey's life was his longtime friendship with Porter Stansberry, who Rey knew since high school. The two were extremely close, almost like family. Porter eventually built a career in financial publishing, founding an investment advisory company, Stansberry and Associates Investment Research, that produced investment newsletters. Stansberry and Associates was a wholly owned subsidiary of Agora Financial, a large financial publishing company. When Porter's business expanded to Baltimore, he invited Rey to move there as well, offering him work producing video content and writing promotional material. When Rey joined Agora in 2004, his initial responsibilities centered on the Rebound Report, a newsletter providing stock analysis and investment advice, where he contributed editorial content based on his prior experience in finance. By late 2005, Rey transitioned from full-time newsletter work to script writing and freelance video production for Agora affiliates, including the Oxford Club. He leveraged his creative skills as an aspiring filmmaker to develop polished materials for the company's promotional and educational efforts. These projects supported Agora's seminars and publications, focusing on investment strategies, but Rey had no direct involvement in sales or promotions. In the months leading up to Rey's death, people close to him noticed some changes. He began to appear anxious and on edge. Rey told his wife Allison that he felt someone might be watching him. On more than one occasion, he jumped up in the middle of the night after claiming that he heard noises outside their house. Once, after two separate incidents when the alarm system at their home went off, Rey insisted on sleeping with a baseball bat nearby. These behaviors were unusual for him and worried those around him, though there was no clear explanation. Allison said he was clearly frightened, which was out of character for him. On the evening of May 16, 2006, Allison was out of town on a business trip when she tried to call Rey. He didn't answer, so at 9:30 p.m. she phoned a coworker of hers, Claudia, who was staying at the couple's home. Claudia told her that Rey had received a phone call around 6:30 p.m. that evening. She said that he answered it, and she overheard him immediately say something like, "Oh," or "Oh shit," acting surprised or alarmed. Then he grabbed his car keys and rushed out of the house. He did not tell Claudia where he was going or when he would be back. At first, Claudia assumed that Rey had simply gone out briefly and would return soon. However, around 5 a.m. the next morning, Claudia called Allison to let her know that Rey still had not returned home. Knowing this is out of character for him, Allison immediately drove back to Baltimore, calling friends, family, and co-workers to let them know Rey was missing. She also filed a missing person report at around 3 p.m. on May 17th with the Baltimore Police Department. The family immediately began searching Baltimore neighborhoods, parks, and areas Rey was known to frequent. They distributed missing persons posters featuring Rey's photo, physical description, clothing details, and information about a $1,000 reward offered by his friend and employer, Porter Stansberry. Over the coming days, relatives from out of state, including Allison's parents from Colorado, Rey's brother from Florida, his mother from Puerto Rico, and his sister from North Carolina, traveled to Baltimore to join the search efforts. On May 22nd, Allison's parents finally spotted Rey's black 2001 Mitsubishi Montero, undamaged in a parking lot on the 1000 block of St. Paul Street in downtown Baltimore, just a short walk from the historic Belvedere Hotel. The hotel, in turn, is located only a few blocks from the offices of Stansberry and Associates. A parking ticket on the vehicle showed that it had been there since the 16th. The discovery of his car prompted a more focused search around the hotel. No ransom demands or suspicious contacts were reported, and the reward was later increased to $5,000 as search efforts continued without leads. The Baltimore Police Department determined that there was no activity on Rey's cell phone, bank accounts, or credit cards since he left his house on May 16. Investigators focused on the phone call Rey had received before leaving, and his phone records later showed that the last call he received came from Agora's switchboard. However, the identity of the caller could not be determined. To this day, exactly who placed that call has never been publicly confirmed. This detail has become one of the most discussed and controversial aspects of the case. On May 24th, 8 days after Ray disappeared, three of his co-workers from Stansberry and Associates decided to search for clues in a parking garage adjacent to the Belvedere Hotel. The building has a complex layout, including a main tower and lower annexes. From the fifth floor of the parking garage, they looked down on the roof of a lower annex of the Belvedere, adjacent to the main building. One of the men saw something unusual, a hole in the roof measuring about 4 feet by 5 feet. It looked out of place, as if something had crashed through it. On top of the roof, next to the hole, were two large flip-flops, a cell phone, and a pair of glasses. Overcome by a sense of dread, they called the police. When police arrived at the scene, investigators examined the hole in the roof and the area beneath it. They asked hotel concierge Gary Shivers to open the door to the locked, little-used conference room on the second-floor annex under the hole. That's when they discovered Ray's body under the punctured ceiling. Police later determined that it had fallen around 10 stories from an upper level of the building before crashing through the ceiling of the lower roof. The body was in a state of partial decomposition, having lain undiscovered for about a week, and was described in the initial police report as that of an unidentified male. Police later reported that Ray's cell phone and eyeglasses were recovered from the roof, appearing relatively undamaged despite the circumstances. The conference room was inaccessible from inside the hotel without keys, indicating that entry to the space could only have occurred from above through the breached roof and ceiling. Prior search efforts had focused on areas near the hotel, but had not extended inside the building structure. Upon discovery of the body, Baltimore police secured the scene and notified Ray's family the same day, confirming his identity through his personal effects. Suspicious details arose that raised numerous questions. Investigators believed that the location of his flip-flops and undamaged cell phone near the hole in the roof was unusual because it suggests that he may have removed them before going through the opening. His glasses were also found intact and unscratched near the hole. Ray's money clip, a gift from his wife that he was always known to carry, was not found on his body, at the scene, or at his home. It was never recovered. Another point of contention was the physical logistics of the fall. The hole in the second-floor ceiling was roughly the size of a person, but it was positioned at a sufficient distance from the edge of the main tower's roof that it seemed difficult to reach by a simple jump. Ray would have had to take a running leap off the main building and jump a considerable distance to land where he did. Some experts argued that such a jump was possible, especially given Ray's height and athletic build. Others countered that it would have been extremely difficult, if not impossible, without a running start that would have been hard to achieve on the roof. One further complicating factor is that Ray reportedly was known to be afraid of heights. Adding to the confusion was the lack of clear evidence that Ray had been on the roof at all. Not a single eyewitness reported seeing him there that night, even though he would be hard to miss at 6'5". Security camera footage from the Belvedere Hotel yielded no images of Ray entering the building, as the camera system was mysteriously malfunctioning at the time. In short, there were no clear signs of Ray accessing the roof through the hotel, though it was not impossible for someone who was determined to do so. The autopsy revealed that Ray had suffered multiple rib fractures, broken shins, punctured lungs, and numerous lacerations, along with other extreme bodily injuries. Michael Byer, a retired Baltimore Police Department homicide detective who had been involved in the case, said he was among the few in law enforcement who doubted suicide as the cause of death, saying the scene looked staged. He was reassigned only 3 weeks after beginning his investigation. One of the most mysterious aspects of this case is a cryptic 2-page note that was found by Ray's brother Angel while searching his house for clues following his disappearance. The note had been folded up, placed in plastic, and taped to the back of Ray's home computer monitor, where it was not immediately visible. The lengthy note was typed in very small font and was written in a strange, rambling style. It has been interpreted by some as a farewell message indicative of suicidal intent, featuring delusional elements such as references to films like Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut and the 1997 mystery thriller The Game, as well as deceased figures like Christopher Reeve. The note's content, addressed to brothers and sisters and including Masonic references, aligned with Ray's recent interest in Freemasonry, which he had reportedly inquired about joining on the day he vanished. It also mentioned the names of other prominent figures in Hollywood, biblical quotations, abstract ideas, and additional ramblings. The note was so puzzling to police that it was sent to the FBI for analysis. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit determined it was not explicitly a suicide note, with no confession of intent to harm himself. They described it instead as a weird stream of consciousness, potentially containing coded phrases, and said it was indicative of possible psychosis rather than a traditional suicide farewell. Police initially considered the note important, but later seemed to dismiss it as irrelevant, suggesting it might be creative writing or even part of a screenplay idea. Ray's family, however, believed it held meaning and possibly clues about what had happened to him. The Baltimore City Medical Examiner's Office ruled the manner of death as undetermined due to insufficient evidence to classify it as suicide, homicide, or accident. They cited multiple blunt force injuries consistent with a high fall, but noted anomalies such as Ray's intact eyeglasses and cell phone found on the lower rooftop, his flip-flops, reportedly with drag marks nearby, and the absence of typical suicide indicators like a traditional suicide note or prior distress signals. Forensic analysis of the injuries indicated that they required a fall from approximately 200 feet to produce the observed trauma patterns, though the exact trajectory and point of origin remained unclear due to the unusual location of the body beneath the hole in the lower roof. The Baltimore Police Department, however, classified the case as a probable suicide, pointing to forensic evidence suggesting a running leap from the roof and the cryptic note taped to Ray's home computer. Mechanically, the suicide theory holds that Ray accessed the hotel's 13th floor rooftop, possibly via a fire escape, an unsecured door, or a window, and jumped. This trajectory is said to align with the autopsy findings of his multiple severe injuries. Alternative reconstructions, including a 2022 analysis, propose that he may have jumped from the adjacent parking garage for greater privacy, given its proximity to his car's location and the absence of witnesses, rather than the rooftop of the main tower. This suicide explanation garnered initial support from Baltimore police, who leaned toward it based on both the physical evidence and lack of foul play indicators. However, Ray's family largely rejected it, even though some members did later acknowledge elements like work-related pressures as potential factors in his death. For her part, Allison has always believed that Ray was murdered, and she wonders if his death was somehow connected to his work writing financial newsletters for Stansberry and Associates. The Rebound report provided financial advice to subscribers who paid upwards of $1,000 for each newsletter. A year before Ray joined Agora, the company, along with its Stansberry division, was accused of violating Securities and Exchange Commission regulations by essentially selling false, baseless financial advice to investors. There is speculation that Ray's financial newsletter had similarly recommended stocks which had not rebounded to investors, possibly creating enemies for him or unwittingly entangling him in a scheme of some sort. The scrutiny by the SEC ultimately culminated in a fine of $1.5 million in 2007. However, Ray's contributions to the company were peripheral, limited to administrative and production tasks, rather than advisory or sales activities. Still, he reportedly had transitioned from a full-time role at Agora to freelancing in 2005 amid dissatisfaction with underperforming stock recommendations he had written about. After Ray's body was found, Porter Stansbury reportedly placed a gag order on his employees, instructing them not to speak to the media or police without legal counsel. While this may have been a standard legal precaution, it fueled suspicion among those who already felt something was being hidden. Police stated that they interviewed Porter and others at the company and found no evidence of foul play. No one was ever named as a suspect. Still, the lack of transparency left many dissatisfied. Aside from the suicide theory, there are other hypotheses that attempt to explain what may have led to Ray's death. One suggests his death was a murder that was connected to his employment at Agora Financial, particularly its subsidiary Stansbury and Associates, amid the ongoing SEC scrutiny over fraudulent investment promotions. Some people suggest that Ray may have uncovered additional improprieties or been pressured due to the firm's practices, leading to foul play, though no direct evidence links him to any wrongdoing or otherwise supports this motive. Another conspiracy theory centers on possible ties to the Freemasons. Elisa said that Ray had been researching the organization in the weeks prior, leading to unsubstantiated speculation of a botched initiation, threat from a lodge, or murder to silence his inquiries. It's true that, on the day Ray vanished, he reportedly spoke with a member of a Maryland Freemason lodge to inquire about possibly joining. That same day, he also purchased the book Freemasons for Dummies. In addition, part of the cryptic note found taped to his computer included the phrase, "Whom virtue unites, death will not separate," which is associated with Freemasonry, and the note both began and ended with references linked to the Masonic order. However, investigators found no evidence that Ray ever completed any formal initiation. Most likely, he was simply curious, doing research, and reached out to learn more, perhaps as part of personal interest or even for creative inspiration, such as a screenplay, instead of progressing toward formal membership. Ray's death was featured in the first episode, Mystery on the Rooftop, of the Netflix reboot of Unsolved Mysteries in July 2020. Terry Dunn Muir, the series producer and co-creator, said in an interview with The Wrap, "We produced over 1,300 stories in our lives, and I think Rey Rivera is one of the most intriguing and baffling mysteries that we have done." Ray's brother Angel took part in the documentary series in the hope that it might lead someone to share new information about his brother's unexplained death. At the time, he told the New York Times, "We'll get it out to more ears and eyes than we could have ever possibly imagined. For my parents, even for me, there's that closure that we're all looking for." Law enforcement officials continue to maintain that there was no evidence of homicide. They emphasize that mental health struggles are not always visible to loved ones, and that unusual behavior in the weeks before Ray's death could indicate a psychological crisis. From their perspective, the available evidence pointed to suicide, even if the circumstances were unusual. Ray's family, on the other hand, has never accepted that explanation. They continue to advocate for a deeper investigation and for the case to be reclassified in a way that reflects the uncertainty they believe exists. To them, Ray was a man full of life, creativity, and plans, not someone preparing to die. Allison still holds out hope that someone will come forward with a clue or a lead that could help explain the mysterious death of her husband. What is certain is that Ray was more than a mystery. He was a husband, a son, a brother, and a friend. He was a storyteller who wanted to create something lasting. The questions surrounding his death have, in a tragic way, become the story that outlived him. Nearly 20 years later, the hole in the roof of the Belvedere Hotel has long since been repaired, and Baltimore has moved on. But for those who knew Ray, and those who have encountered his story, the sense of unease remains. This case stands as a reminder that not all deaths yield clear answers, and that sometimes the truth, whatever it may be, stays just out of reach. The evidence points in too many directions, and not enough at the same time. What remains is a family searching for truth, a note that refuses to speak plainly, and a fall that many say defies both logic and physics. Until these questions are answered, Rey Rivera's story lingers, an echo of the unknown, waiting to be heard. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Echoes of the Unknown. If you found this story compelling, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with fellow mystery lovers. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some mysteries don't demand answers. Instead, they dare us to keep asking questions.